Just because you're good at making money or you brought in a lot of money doesn't mean you should be a politician or even that you're the right person for the job. I'm going to share my thoughts on some of the flaws that I see with the Canadian political system, or to be more specific, the nomination selection process. How to pick the candidate that's going to run for you in your riding, so in your area, in the next election, federal or provincial election. As it stands right now, the person selected to be the candidate in the next election, they went through the candidate selection process, they ran a fair campaign, and one, they still might not be the best person for the job, and they could be doing a disservice to the party if they are the ones to represent them in the next election. I want to just clear a few things up before I go any further, okay? This is important. Number one, I'm not bashing Canada at all. I love this country. I'm proud to be Canadian. And although we do have our problems, there's nowhere else in this world that I would rather live. Number two, this doesn't mean that any current or even former politician did anything wrong. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about here. I know many politicians, I would never question their loyalty. They love their province, their state, their country, and they're in it for the right reasons, and I love them, truly. Number three, I'm not bashing one political party in particular, okay? I've been around the block, and all parties do the same thing. Politics can be very boring, okay? And it can be very frustrating. So I'm not going to bore you with a long video, step-by-step process. I'm actually going to dumb it down. And don't take offense to that. When I say I'm going to dumb something down, I dumb it down for me to be able to understand and for me to be able to explain, not for you. I dumb it down for me. So let's just say that there's going to be an election 1 year from now, right across the entire country, a federal election. Well, it's about time that the different parties start figuring out who the candidate is that is going to run for them in their riding in the next election. So the Conservatives, the Liberals, the PPC, the NDP, they're all going to have to figure out who the candidate is that's going to represent them in the next election. And I know there's some other independents as well. I've just generalized here. Most ridings have an association. A candidate who's interested in becoming the nominee in the next election, they have to go to the riding association and they basically have to apply. And it's a heck of a process. They do a background check. They want to make sure they meet all the requirements, which I'm not going to get into, but I mean, listen, if you just got released from prison, you're not going to be a candidate in the next federal election, okay? I'm not going to get into all the details. One of the things that happens during this process, and some people will say is the most important, is the nominee or the potential nominee has to go and sell party memberships. So I'm going to break this down. I'm going to make it real easy. Let's say a party membership is $20. The person who's interested in running has to go out. They could go door to door. They could go to friends, businesses, and they need to sell as many party memberships as they can for their particular party. It's a good way for a party to make money as well, because elections do cost money. So let's say the candidate signs up 1,000 people. That's $20,000. If my math is right, that's $20,000 that they have for the next federal election, which is great. It could go to signs, it goes to all kinds of different things, but elections cost money. Now, because you sold the most amount of memberships and you're probably going to have the most amount of people voting for you to be the candidate, you're probably going to win. Now, here's a problem that I have with this. Just because somebody had some friends in the riding who may have owned some businesses or been well connected at churches or different community centers that did a lot of the work for them and they sold the most amount of memberships and made the most amount of money doesn't mean that they are grassroots, doesn't mean that they're the right person for the job. I'm going to use a real example of something that I witnessed in Canada. There was one riding in particular. There was two people going through the candidate selection process for one riding in Canada. But I was looking at the two candidates, and one of them I knew a little bit. The other one I didn't really know at all. So, I mean, I was doing my research as well. I got some family that lives in this community. I was doing my research. Now, I knew that one of them had a lot of financial backing because of who their family was. And I knew the other person seemed to be more well-known in the community, but they didn't really have any financial backing at all. They grew up in the community. They were not of means. Is that a proper way for me to say it? The person who was well connected sold the most amount of memberships, and they were in fact the nominee. The other person, who was very grassroots, well loved by the community, didn't sell as much memberships, they lost. in the next election, the next federal election, when it came and went, they actually lost. They lost and it went to a different party. And it was kind of a shocker from many people. But the community kind of pushed back a little bit because they didn't know this other person. They didn't know this other person who was running for that party in particular, and it kind of looked like maybe elitist. Again, I hate to use that word, but they maybe have looked a little bit of elitist because they knew that they had some strong financial backing, and they came in and they were going to be the candidate. And at the end of the day, the community at large, so for the general election, not the candidate selection committee, the general election, they didn't trust this person and they voted them out. They voted that party out for the first time in many years. Now, here's the thing. I know, again, elections cost money and it's important to raise money. But just because somebody brought in a lot of money doesn't mean that they should be the candidate. They may not have the trust of the community. And I truly believe if this other person was the nominee for the election, that they would have won. But, I mean, people talk about party loyalty. Listen, Canadians generally, they want the right person for the job, as long as that person's in it for the right reasons. But just because you come from a family of means, or you're well connected to the local businesses or churches or establishments, and they're able to sell off a lot of memberships, doesn't mean you should be the nominee in the next election for that riding. There's a lot of ridings out there, and I know this because I've spoken to some of the candidates and the community. Again, I've been around, and maybe there's a lot of subsidized housing in that riding. Maybe there's a lot of low-income families in that riding. Not everybody has the means to give $200 or take part in a $200 golf tournament, fundraising golf tournament, or $500 fundraising golf tournament, which I've seen. Not everybody has that. But maybe some people can spare $5 for a burger. Come and get to know the candidate who might run for you in the next election. $5 fundraising lunch. And if you don't have $5, fine, come anyways, because come and get to know the candidate. That person who has that, those grassroots, the outreach, they know the community. That person quite often doesn't stand a chance because they just don't have the financial means, even though if they were elected, they would be the right person for the job. They would represent that community with pride, with honor, and they would take the voices of the community to Parliament Hill. That person would be the right person for the job, but they didn't come from a family of means and are not well connected, and they didn't feel like asking every single person they knew for $20 for a party membership, or 30 or 50, whatever it is these days, short-term, long-term memberships. But they know the community, they have the trust of the community, and they would be the right person for the job. I didn't mean to rant. I look at my computer every now and then because I have some points that I try to get across, some speaking points. Sometimes I look at it, sometimes I don't. But this, to me, is one of the problems with the candidate selection process in Canadian politics. If you agree with me, let me know. If you don't agree with me, please let me know. These are things, again, that I've witnessed firsthand. I'm speaking from experience, and these are, in my opinion, some of the problems that I see. Please let me know what you think. Again, I read every single comment. If it's appropriate, I do respond. So I would really appreciate you telling me your thoughts. And until the next video, be safe out there, look after one another, and perhaps we will see you again.